Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are jumping straight in today looking at Friday, September 26th, 2025, the 80th session of the UN General Assembly.
And specifically, a moment of pretty high political drama there. Our sources focus on the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, approaching the podium.
Right, but it's what happened as he approached that caught everyone's eye. We're talking about a big walkout, a coordinated exit.
Yeah, many diplomats, officials, they just stood up and left the hall as he stepped up to the microphone.
Leaving him, as the sources put it, facing a largely empty hall. Quite the visual.
Absolutely. And that image, that action, is really the core of our deep dive today. We want to unpack what that kind of protest means, diplomatically.
And then contrast that sort of external rejection with the message Netanyahu actually delivered, because his speech was anything but apologetic.
Exactly. And also how he delivered it, which gets really interesting later on.
So the immediate takeaway from the sources, the aha moment, if you like, is that this walkout wasn't just a disagreement, it was significant. It apparently underscored Israel's deepening isolation. That's our jumping off point.
And that phrase, deepening isolation, really warrants a closer look. We need to understand what's behind that, why those diplomats walked.
A walkout like that at the UNGA, I mean, that's a strong statement, isn't it?
Oh, it's one of the strongest diplomatic signals you can send, short of, severing ties completely. It's a collective statement that a country's actions are seen as fundamentally unacceptable by a significant portion of the international community present.
And the sources connect it directly, don't they? They link the empty seats squarely to the ongoing conflict.
Yes. The quote is, it reflects this isolation as it continues its war in Gaza.
Yes.
So the context is clearly the military campaign.
But it seems there's more feeding into this climate of isolation than just the general disapproval of the war.
That's right. The sources layer in other critical factors, not just the walkout itself.
Okay, so what else is contributing, according to the material we have?
Well, first, there's the visual drama of the walkout. But second, the sources highlight serious legal issues facing the Prime Minister personally. They specifically mention he's confronting war crimes charges at the International Criminal Court, ICC.
Wow. Okay. So linking the diplomatic snub directly to ICC charges, that really raises the temperature, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It shifts the narrative. It suggests the international concern isn't just political disagreement over policy, but potentially extends to fundamental legal questions about the conduct of the war itself. It connects that diplomatic isolation to accountability on an international legal stage.
So it's not just we don't like your policy, it's potentially we have serious legal concerns.
Precisely. That linkage really amplifies the political cost and the pressure.
So we've got the diplomatic walkout, the shadow of the ICC. What's the third layer the sources mention?
It's about his political allies, or rather the lack thereof. The sources note that Netanyahu at this point has few close allies beyond U.S. President Donald Trump.
So relying heavily on one major power.
Exactly. And when you stack those three things together, the UN walkout, the ICC context, and this narrow base of international support, you really get a sense of the intense pressure cooker environment he was speaking into.
It wasn't just an empty room. It was, well, it sounds like a symbol of a much broader, multi-layered international challenge Israel was facing at that moment.
That's a great way to put it. And it makes his actual speech content even more striking.
Right, because facing all that, the empty seats, the legal threats, the diplomatic chill, you might expect, I don't know, a softer tone, maybe an attempt to bridge the gap.
But that's not what happened. The address was profoundly resolute, unwavering, really.
So how did he verbally push back against that silent rejection?
He used the platform,
Yeah.
empty seats and all, to send a very clear, very strong message about the conflict. The first core point was total commitment to the military goal.
And the wording was direct.
Extremely. He said, Israel will finish the job in Gaza, and we will do so as quickly as possible.
Finish the job. That phrase really signals determination, doesn't it? Almost defiant in that context. It sounds like a message aimed perhaps more domestically or at the military than at the diplomats who'd left.
I think that's right. It projects confidence against that backdrop of isolation. And then came the second key message.
Which was aimed directly at Hamas.
Yes, a direct demand to their leaders. A very specific set of conditions to end the fighting.
Which were?
3 things. Surrender, lay down your weapons, and release the hostages.
So completely putting the responsibility for stopping hostilities onto the other side, no compromise offered in that statement.
None mentioned in the source, no.
Yep.
It links their surrender and disarmament directly to the release of hostages.
Okay, so the message itself is defiant and uncompromising. But now let's get to that really unique part you mentioned earlier, the delivery method. This is where it gets quite unusual, right?
It really does. This is perhaps the most fascinating detail in the sources. He's in New York facing this diplomatic rejection.
An empty hall.
An empty hall, exactly.
Mm.
But he apparently took extraordinary steps to make sure his message was heard, just elsewhere, not necessarily by the diplomats in front of him.
So, bypassing the immediate UN audience, who was the intended audience then?
It seems the primary audience shifted. If the international community wasn't listening in the hall, the priority became ensuring people inside the conflict zone in Gaza heard him loud and clear.
How? What did they do? The sources mention specific tactics?
Yes, two methods. The first one is maybe more conventional for wartime, though still striking in this context, setting up loudspeakers around Gaza to broadcast his remarks.
Loudspeakers. So physically projecting the sound across areas in Gaza, that's a very direct, almost unavoidable way to communicate.
Right. It targets everyone on the ground, civilians, fighters. It makes the demands for surrender very immediate, very tangible.
But there was a second method mentioned, one that sounds much more technologically sophisticated.
Yes, and this is the one that really stands out. Netanyahu also claimed, and the source uses that word, claimed, that Israeli intelligence hadn't just used loudspeakers. They had apparently streamed his words directly onto mobile phones across the territory.
Directly onto people's phones, like bypassing normal broadcasts.
That's the implication. Streaming a live UN speech straight to individual mobile devices in an active conflict zone.
Wow. If true, what does that suggest? I mean, the capability needed for that.
It suggests a very high level of technical sophistication, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Extensive penetration of local communication networks, the ability to target devices geographically or perhaps even individually. It's a significant claim about intelligence capabilities.
It moves beyond propaganda broadcasts into something much more targeted, almost personalized.
Exactly. It would mean bypassing any potential censorship, any local media filters, and putting his message, finish the job, surrender, release the hostages, literally into the hands of potentially everyone with a mobile phone in Gaza. It weaponizes communication technology in a very direct way.
So let's just pause on that contrast. On the one hand, global diplomats are literally turning their backs, walking out of the premier international forum.
A very public, symbolic rejection.
And on the other hand, there's this simultaneous, high-tech, targeted effort to blast his uncompromising message directly into the conflict zone, onto personal devices and through loudspeakers.
It's an incredibly stark contrast. It suggests a deliberate choice. Prioritize projecting strength and demands locally, directly to the adversary in the affected population, over engaging with or appeasing the dissenting global community.
Defiance seems like the right word again. It's like saying, your diplomatic pressure means less to me right now than ensuring my message hits home over there.
It certainly reads that way. It highlights this dual reality he was operating in. The external isolation might be deep, but the internal resolve, backed by military aims and these advanced communication tactics, was being presented as paramount.
So let's pull this together for someone trying to grasp the significance of that day, September 26, 2025. You've got this split screen. Screen one. The UN, empty seats, the walkout, reflecting that deepening isolation the sources talk about, underscored by the ICC issue and limited alliances.
That's the external picture. Diplomatic isolation, legal pressure.
Screen two, Gaza, an intense, direct communication offensive. Loudspeakers blaring, and this extraordinary claim of streaming the speech directly to mobile phones, delivering a message of absolute resolve. Finish the job, surrender, release the hostages.
That's the internal projection. Uncompromising will, using whatever means necessary, even highly advanced ones, to communicate directly into the heart of the conflict.
So for you, the listener, this event gives a really sharp snapshot, doesn't it? It shows the intense international pressure cooker Israel's leadership was in at that moment, but also their determined, perhaps even defiant response and priorities.
The diplomatic silence in the UN hall was met with a technological megaphone aimed squarely at Gaza. That contrast is really the key insight here.
And that brings us perfectly to our final thought for today, something just based on these sources for you to mull over. Consider this claimed strategy of streaming the speech directly to mobile phones. If a leader can effectively bypass traditional diplomatic stages like the UNGA, bypass international media gatekeepers, and beam their core political and military messages straight to individual people inside a conflict zone.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean for the future power and relevance of those traditional institutions like the UN General Assembly? Are they still the primary stage for global influence if leaders can just go direct?
A really provocative question about the future of diplomacy in a hyper-connected, contested world. Something definitely worth thinking about.
Indeed. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
We hope this look at the UN walkout and the messages surrounding it gave you some valuable context on a really pivotal moment.
Absolutely. Until next time.